Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Virupaksh Vikram, and in this session we will see the strategy for international law. So international law, as we know, is a very important part of the law optional syllabus because an entire part, that is part B of paper 2, is dedicated to it. So just in percentage of the marks that are allotted, international law as a subject in law optional has the highest weightage. Now, often students, and including me, we are not very comfortable with international law when compared to constitutional law and administrative law, and therefore we tend to ignore international law. And since we get optional questions, then most people choose to prefer constitutional law questions over international law. However, in my experience, I think that international law, since lesser people attempt it, is far more rewarding. And once we have understood how to analyze international law PYQs and then develop an answer framework, it can also be very rewarding. So with that in mind, let us approach what should be the strategy for international law. So before deciding any strategy, what we need to do is understand the syllabus of international law. UPSC has been very kind to provide a very detailed and in-depth syllabus, and therefore using that, we can generate some themes that are repeatedly asked in the international law paper. Based on these themes, then what we can do is develop an answer framework for answering each of these themes, because specific types of questions require specific types of answers, which we shall deal with in the course of this lecture. So on my reading, I have divided international law in the syllabus in 4 themes. The first theme is with respect to jurisprudential parts of international law. So the initial 4-5 topics, like what is the nature of international law, what are the different definitions of international law, what are the sources of law in international law, its comparison with municipal law matlab domestic law, say kya comparison hai international law ka. These are jurisprudential type of questions, and these are asked generally they are found in topics 1, 2, 4 and 5. Generally, many questions in international law, at least 2 compulsory questions, are asked from this jurisprudential topic, and apart from that also, many 20 markers and 15 markers are asked regarding the jurisprudential aspect, making it perhaps the most important theme in the international law syllabus. Secondly, we have various concepts of international law. So concepts of international law are like state recognition, how are new states recognized in international law, state succession. So these are basically the concepts listed as various individual topics in international law, and we need to have a specific way of answering these questions that are based on individual concepts. Apart from that, there is jurisdiction, nationality, extradition, use of force, like the one that is happening between Israel and Palestine, or the one that is happening in the Russia-Ukraine war. The third theme is regarding international institutions. So the UPSC syllabus, it mentions one international institution directly, that is the UN. Apart from that, indirectly, we also need to study Bretton Woods institutions. So Bretton Woods institutions, as I'm sure everybody knows, are the World Bank and the IMF. So questions on them have also been asked. Apart from that, WTO. So there is one pointer in the international law syllabus stating new international economic order. Under that, Bretton Woods institutions and WTO are extremely necessary to be read. Most of the questions revolve around these 2 institutions. Then we have the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which is again an arm of the UN. Questions have been asked on this, and the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Finally, the 4th theme that is found in the law optional syllabus are relating to special branches of international law. So what do I mean by special branches of international law? So specific themes in international law, like the law of the sea. So UNCLOS, every year 1 or 2 questions come from this, I think, a small topic. Then humanitarian law and human rights law. Humanitarian law means the law that governs how warfare is to be done. So every year again 1 or 2 questions on this. Law on nuclear weapons, directly mentioned in the syllabus. Every other year there is a question on this. International environmental law, terrorism. So these are basically specific branches of international law that have their own jurisprudence and their own types of questions that arise in the UPSC syllabus and question paper. Now, having studied that these are the 4 themes, let us study what types of questions are asked, and then let us study how to approach them. So, coming to PYQ themes. So, basically in the jurisprudential topics like nature, definitions, sources, relationship of international law, there are 2 types of questions. One are direct questions that are asked. So, a direct question will come that what is the status of an individual in international law, or explain a particular theory of international law. So these types of direct questions come. They are easy to answer. We'll see how to answer them in the next slide. Apart from that, some indirect questions on jurist opinions comes. So at this juncture, it is important to note that the jurists and what they say is extremely important in international law, because if one sees Article 38 of the ICJ statute, it lists down jurist opinion as a secondary source of law. In no other law are jurist opinions taken as even a secondary source, but in international law, jurist opinions count for a lot. And therefore, even in UPSC questions, we see that a jurist statement is given. For instance, there is a very common question that comes that international law is merely positive morality. And this was a statement given by the jurist Austin, and UPSC asks us to critically analyze the statement. So basically it is an indirect question relating to jurisprudence. So these are the 2 types of questions that are asked in the first theme. In the second theme, that is in relation to concepts of international law, detailed. This is the important keyword over here. Detailed questions are asked on individual facets. So for instance, I said that one concept in international law is state recognition. So a detailed question on an individual facet, like the difference between de facto recognition and de jure recognition. What are the legal effects of recognition? Can insurgencies or insurgents be granted recognition? So very detailed questions on individual facets are asked. Thus, all concepts and their individual facets need to be studied in detail, which we shall do during the series of lectures that we have planned. Apart from that, interlinkages between various concepts is often asked. So, for instance, let us see that in the syllabus, we saw that use of force and settlement of disputes are 2 topics, 2 different concepts in international law. But a question can come that is use of force ever justified to settle disputes in international law? So basically, an interlinkage between 2 concepts has been asked by UPSC. This is the second type of question that is asked in our second theme. Apart from that, again, jurist opinions regarding concepts are very important. For instance, there are some jurists in, let us say, state recognition. They say that recognition is a political act. Now, critically analyze. So is it a legal act? Is it a political act? Now, we need to give various jurist opinions on this. As I already explained, jurists are extremely important in writing international law answers. In the third theme, international institutions, this I believe is the most simple theme among all these 4. The main questions are what are the roles, what are the functions, what are the powers, sometimes what are the reforms. So they'll ask what are, in 2022 there was a question that is what are the powers and functions of the United Nations General Assembly. In 2023 there was a question regarding what are the powers and functions of the WTO, World Trade Organization. So these types of questions are asked along with their associated concepts. So each institution also has an associated concept. For instance, there is the veto in the United Nations Security Council. So it is a concept under a particular institution, and a direct question on that can also be asked. Finally, we come to special branches of international law. So as we saw that these are international environmental law, law on nuclear weapons, very specific branches that have their own specific laws, either treaties or case laws dealing with it. In this, individual concepts are asked again in depth. So like the concept, special branches also have individual concepts asked in depth. For example, the law of the sea. Every year there may be a question on what are the rights and obligations in the continental shelf, what are the rights and obligations in the contiguous zone, what are the rights and obligations in exclusive economic zone, what is hot pursuit. So these are individual concepts in a special branch of international law, and detailed questions on these individual concepts are asked. So basically this and this we need to prepare in detail. Here, since direct questions are asked, then therefore there is no need to stress over this. And in jurisprudence, once we understand the basic principles that we shall do during the first lecture, understand these basic principles that govern international law, answering these types of questions will also be important, will also be easy. Finally, we have linkages with other mainstream topics. So sometimes a question is asked by linking these two topics, international institutions and special. For instance, a question was asked some years ago that how has UN helped in protecting international environment? So it took an international institution, then linked it with a special branch of law, that is international environmental law. UN institution, international environmental law. So basically developing linkages by having a comprehensive understanding of each topic is again extremely necessary for scoring well in international law. Now we come to the answer approach. So we saw what types of questions are asked in the previous slide. In the first theme, either direct questions are asked or jurist opinions are asked. So how do we need to prepare this? For answering, we need to use theories. In jurisprudence, the use of theories is extremely important, because jurisprudence is based on theories. There are different theories of analyzing a particular proposition. These theories are given by various jurists along with their arguments. So like in general studies for UPSC, we give the pros and cons and then a balanced way forward. In jurisprudential types of questions in international law, we give one jurist opinion, second, third, and then give a balanced opinion as to which theory is most applicable. Apart from that, so this is necessary. This part about giving jurist argument is necessary. This is value addition, that if we have some additional case law that supports a particular theory, then that fetches us that extra 1 or 2 marks. I have also collated these types of case laws during the lectures, so we'll deal with them as and when we deal with individual jurisprudence topics. Secondly, coming to concepts of international law. So again, in the previous slide, we saw that what types of questions are asked: detailed questions on individual facets, interlinkages, and jurist opinions. So here, how our answer structure should be: firstly, we should explain the concept and the rationale. This is extremely important, that if a particular concept exists, if state recognition exists and there are certain essential elements, why are those essential elements required? If state succession exists, what is the rationale behind state succession? So writing the rationale of concepts in this types of questions is extremely important. This can again be supported using jurist opinion, case laws, or examples. Now examples, how can we use examples? Examples have a very important role in international law, because international law is developing daily with changing geopolitical and geoeconomic events. So for instance, the Russia-Ukraine war happened. So in the concept of, in a question relating to use of force, we can use that example, that how use of the concept of use of force is being applied in a recent example, right? Russia-Ukraine. Or for instance, say the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan. Now how state recognition, are we recognizing them? Are we not recognizing them? What is the difference between recognition of state and recognition of government? These type of concepts can be explained using recent examples, which fetch a lot of marks. Coming to international institutions, now we saw that generally very direct questions on roles, powers, and functions are asked. One approach is writing them generally, but if we write them generally, we will also get general or average marks. So how to increase marks in these types of questions is to use articles of the treaties that have founded that international institution. For instance, if a question comes on the United Nations Security Council, then mentioning that which part of the UN Charter deals with it, which articles give what powers to the UNSC, which article gives it the power to deploy peacekeeping forces, which article gives it the power to recommend various modes of settling disputes between warring parties. Use of articles in all cases is extremely important, not only in UN, also in WTO or any other organization that is formed by a treaty. Apart from that, some case laws, so case laws are generally lesser when comparing, when dealing with international institutions, but some case laws as and when required can be sprinkled to give our answers more depth and show that we have not only a theoretical understanding, but also a practical understanding of how courts have stated what international institutions can and must do. Finally, coming to the special branch of international law, special branches. So in here we saw that in-depth questions are asked about specific facets. So we need to use articles whenever an individual concept is asked for. Where, for instance, there is a question regarding hot pursuit under the UN clause, the law of the sea. Then we need to mention Article 111, which deals with this. If there is a question on high seas, then Article 87 and 88 of the UN clause, which deal with high seas, need to be mentioned. And unique case laws. So because it is a special branch of law, it also has unique case laws that are relevant with it. For instance, I think many people would know about the Italy versus India case, which dealt with what is the law governing a contiguous zone, wherein the mariners shot some fishermen in India and it was decided by the ICJ. So unique case laws and concepts that are relevant to the said branch of international law. So every branch has certain concepts of its own. For instance, in international environmental law, there is a concept of soft law. So what is soft law, how it is used? There is a concept of framework convention. Everybody must have heard about UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Combating Climate Change. So these type of individual concepts also must be studied in depth. So finally, some general pointers regarding what one should keep an eye out for while studying this course and also while attempting to write answers for international law. Firstly, using jurist opinions. As I said, it is a secondary source of law. It is extremely important. UPSC also asks jurist statements directly, which means that they want us to support our answers with jurist opinions. So this is the most important thing. Secondly, PYQ analysis. So PYQs, if we see that in international law or in any part of law, more than 50% of questions are repeating in some form or the other. What this means is that if we are prepared with these questions from before, they would provide us some form of relief in the examination because we already know the answer. They would reduce our time, and therefore doing PYQ analysis and then developing your own model answers for those types of questions that keep repeating. I shall tell what types of questions are repeating in each topic of international law, so you do not have to worry about that. But preparing model answers, that is again extremely important. Using articles for topics that have a special treaty. This is again a value addition point. Many people, they write general stuff united in questions like what are the roles and functions of United Nations General Assembly. General answers, as I said, general marks. Using articles for special treaty is something that needs to be memorized and it is very marks fetching. Recent examples, as I said, the Taliban example, Russia-Ukraine example, any other example that keeps on happening in current affairs, they add value in certain topics. Finally, this is another important point. So in the law optional syllabus, if we take it in totality, constitutional law, international law, everything, there are a lot of case laws to remember. So a technique that I developed was using case laws that are repeating in nature. By repeating in nature, I mean that they are such cases that deal not only with one concept, but with multiple concepts. Now, if we remember one case for multiple concepts, then it cuts down the number of case laws that we have to remember. Firstly, which is a relief for us. And secondly, because they deal with so many topics, they are landmark cases. And quoting them in our answers also is a good thing. So I have also compiled a list of these case laws, which I shall deal with during the relevant lectures. Finally, the most important point, however, the most understated, is answering the question. So even in international law, in constitutional law, in GS, wherever this happens, even if one does not know the answer, though the chance of that is less because in optional paper we can choose what questions we want to write, still if one is forced to write an answer that he does not know, try to use the general principles that we will learn during the course of all the lectures and then give a logical and coherent answer. It may not have many value addition points, but it will still answer the question and it will fetch you better marks than just writing what you know. I think that is it for my side. Meet you all in the first lecture.